Now, the ABC talks a big game about sexism and, let's be woke, but they walk something very different. Yesterday on Melbourne ABC Radio's breakfast show, one host, former AFL star Bob Murphy, told an insulting and sexist joke about his co-host, Chanel Vella, when they were interviewing, of all things, an accountant. He suggested Vella's first job had been at an infamous Melbourne strip club. And today came this grovelling apology and a very frosty reception.
I promised Chanel that I'd never disrespect her, and I did break that promise. Put simply, I'm really sorry.
Look, I won't let you off the hook on it. It wasn't okay. I appreciate your words, but we do move on.
Joining me is the panel, Evelyn Rae, farmer, former policewoman and Sky News regular, and James McPherson from the Late Debate here on Sky News. Evelyn, I would bet you two things if a host here at Sky News said that about his female co-host. One, he'd be sacked. But two, at the very minimum, he'd be banned from working again with that co-host, because just for a start, let alone the insult, how could they have on-air chemistry and trust after that? Has the ABC called this wrong?
Look, I'm absolutely no supporter of cancel culture, even if I so desire it regarding the ABC. But look, I don't like cancel culture, not because its fake outrage is so often directed at things that were totally normal yesterday morning, Andrew. But I also don't like it just because of how blatantly selective that it is. You're 100% right. There is absolutely no way that anyone here at Sky News or anyone right of Stalin would get away with this sort of comment. They would absolutely pounce on it. They are hungry and thirsty and out for blood. But, this is kind of how the game works. It's a weapon exclusively used and wielded against the right, while the left evidently is immune to this. And you know what? I think we've been stupid enough to, go along with this game. And, I think often, we scratch our heads going, why is it that they're, kind of not holding their own to their own standards? But I like to remind myself, Andrew, that this was never about elevating public standards, because let's face it, if they didn't have double standards, they would have absolutely no standards at all.
But I have to say, James, Evelyn makes a point about cancel culture, but for me there's also, that's one thing, but there's also this point that you're supposed to be an on-air team. I mean, you with Danica, for instance, on Sky News, you're supposed to be an on-air team. You've got to be at least, assume a friendliness. You've got to welcome people into your friendship. How can you do that when you just heard how it is between the two of them?
Yeah, you raise a good point, Andrew, and I guess we've got to trust that the female co-host in that situation has obviously been okay with the relationship to continue. If she was not, well, then the ABC would have an issue, wouldn't they? And they would need to act. As far as the whole episode goes, I've got to say I'm with Evelyn on this. He made a joke. It wasn't funny. Not only was it not funny, it wasn't appropriate, but he apologised. And I don't think we want a world where someone loses their job because they made an errant comment, even if it was deeply inappropriate. I think we want to move on. Otherwise, we create a world in which no one's game to say anything for fear of slip of a tongue. The funny thing about Bob Murphy, of course, is he's been accused of being so woke that he won't call the AFL the AFL. He calls it the AFLM for men to distinguish it from the AFLW for women. So that's the kind of persona he's got. And then he goes and makes this clanger about the strip club. So, there you go.
What is it? Is the woke rules really just a game? Is it a series of tripwires or a genuine moral conversion? I asked that question. Evelyn, during the election campaign, the Prime Minister used a lot of podcasters and social media influencers to get out his message. He even paid for some to come to cover the budget, pay for their expenses. And the friendlier the better, like Abby Chatfield from shows like The Bachelor.
So I'd love to know, what is the difference in policies, just some examples, between the Coalition and Labor?
Well, right across the board, there's massive difference. We believe in taking action on climate change and see it as an opportunity. They want to delay action till the 2040s, and they have this nuclear fantasy.
We'll get into that, Albert.
They're opposed to renewables.
Look at her nodding away to all these righteous causes. The question is, are these influential mouthpieces he chooses held to the same standards and given the same scrutiny as us in the more traditional media, Evelyn? Because, for instance, when Chatfield then goes to smear on the new Liberal leader, Susan Lee.
Combo being racist and the leader of a Conservative Party, yet also that into numerology. Because the thing is, if you're going to be woo-woo, live the woo-woo.
Check also her hypocrisy, because this is how this same Abby Chatfield reacted when another left-wing podcaster gave her a bit of criticism herself.
Stop lying about my character and my intentions. Please stop dehumanising me. I'm just trying to do what I can to help.
So the question is, Evelyn, what kind of influences is Albanese hanging out with to get his message across, and to what kind of morons must be listening to them?
My goodness, isn't the left just an insatiable beast? It just spares no one, doesn't it? They eat their own. But look, I actually doubt Albanese even knew who Abby Chatfield actually was. And I reckon it was some young staffer that he's hired to organise it all in an attempt to sort of make him appear more relatable. I reckon it's the same person that dressed him in skinny jeans, and then the same person that organised that awful Valentine's Day Instagram reel. I don't know if you remember that, but I have a bit of vomit at the back of my throat remembering it, that cringe, sort of marketing stunt from him. But look, let's be honest. None of this was about political discourse. Absolutely none of this was about truly getting to the bottom of political ideology between the two major parties. It was a shameless stunt by the Labor Party, purely to appeal to those Gen Z TikTokers who get their entire political discourse from a 30-second video that they find on the internet. But Andrew, let's not get too, pessimistic about this. There is hope, because the silver lining to all of this is that when these kids that like these sorts of podcasts and all these little TikTokers, once they graduate from their taxpayer-funded university degrees, they're going to have to enter the real world. They're going to have to pay real taxes and, be faced with reality. And I tell you what, when they are faced with that, they become right-wing real quick.
Well, it hasn't happened to her yet. But James, it is interesting. I mean, if someone was famous on the ABC or whatever, The Guardian, for carrying on like a pork chop like that, absolutely, a Prime Minister would think twice before lowering themselves to actually, use them as a way of getting his message out. But it seems to be different rules for podcasters. Look at that. That's incredible.
Andrew, I think you hold our Prime Minister in far too much esteem. Yes. I think the Prime Minister, he's not above cheapening political debate if it works to his advantage. And it did. On TikTok, he got 4.9 million views compared to Dutton's 1.2 million views, and they won the youth vote. So Anthony Albanese doesn't care who he hangs out with as long as it's to his advantage and it helps him win power, and it did. The problem is we all pay the price, because, as I said, it cheapens the political discourse. Abby Chatfield becomes the political conduit through which our young people hear messages about the future of our nation. That doesn't bode well for anybody except, as I said, Anthony Albanese, who's now in the lodge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I want to pick up on something that Evelyn said there, James, because she says, she vomited quietly with some of the really naff things that he did, trying to be cool with the kids. But the point, I think, James, is that a politician who does that is telling the voters they'll do anything for that the voters want. And I think the ultimate turn-off of voters is a politician that won't do that, that sounds like, they're lecturing them, they're hearing a God that other people don't hear, they're marching to their own arrogant sort of agenda. And the more relatable, or the more, someone's puppet you seem, the safer you seem as well. And I think that's helped him, don't you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he played this whole election very, very well as compared to Peter Dutton, who to me seemed to be very, very managed. And I would have thought it was the other way around. But Albanese came off as likeable and relatable, even though we all knew he was trying so hard to be likeable and relatable.
Well, I think that's the message there. Albanese might have won some votes by saying, I'm so desperate for your vote, I will even talk to Abby Chatfield. Evelyn Rae, James McPherson, thank you very much to you both.